Silent Hill, a video game that has always piqued my interest, but that I've also been too scared to play. Growing up, horror wasn't really my thing. Even though I've been playing video games my entire life, I've missed out on most of what the horror genre has to offer. It wasn't until the past couple years that I started dabbling into more scary games and realized how much I enjoy them. As I've gotten more comfortable with horror, I decided to finally play one of the most iconic games the genre has to offer, Silent Hill. I intended on giving it a fair chance, keeping in mind that if the game didn't click with me due to its age, I could always skip to Silent Hill 2 instead, since that's what many fans would consider the best game in the series. But, to my own surprise, I didn't end up dropping Silent Hill. So, let's talk about my experience playing Silent Hill for the first time in 2023, as a 23-year-old that didn't grow up with the series, or the genre at all for that matter. Now, before we really get into it, I just want to put a tiny disclaimer that this video is all about my experience and opinions. Also, I will be discussing spoilers. Anyway, if you clicked on this video and you somehow have no idea what Silent Hill is, let me give you the basic rundown. Silent Hill is a game developed by Konami's Team Silent that was released on the PlayStation in 1999. It's a survival horror game that follows our protagonist, Harry Mason, as he arrives in the town of Silent Hill, immediately losing his daughter Cheryl in the process and needing to explore the creepy town to find her. Upon starting Silent Hill, you're presented with a cinematic opening movie that shows the characters that you'll get to know on your journey. Immediately, you are blessed by what is Akira Yamaoka's Silent Hill soundtrack and Takayoshi Sato's CGI work, both of which make this opening so intriguing to watch. Akira Yamaoka's work composing the music for the Silent Hill series is truly incredible, and has led him to very quickly become one of, if not, my favorite video game music composers. Although the CGI has not aged quite as well as the soundtrack due to the technical limitations of the time, I was still amazed by how good everything looks. This can be extended to the other CGI cutscenes in the game as well, and it becomes even more impressive when you remember that all of the CGI was done by one person. Based on this opening cutscene, you can already start to feel the vibe of what Silent Hill is going for, and it works really well. Following the opening cinematic, you're greeted with the main menu. For full transparency, I did play on easy for my first playthrough. Starting the game, we're thrown right into the action by needing to search for our missing daughter Cheryl. Even this early in the game, I remember feeling kind of freaked out. This is my first time playing a Silent Hill game after all. I love the effect that the fog gives, not just visually, but the effect it has on the player. In Silent Hill, the fog only allows you to see so far. Maybe there's nothing hiding in the fog, or maybe you'll run a few feet and be greeted by a monster. The fear lies in what can't be seen, and this is a very prominent part of the horror of Silent Hill that I simultaneously enjoyed and dreaded. Now, before we get any further, let's talk about gameplay for a minute. The biggest adjustment that I had to make while playing Silent Hill was getting used to the tank controls. This was the main reason why I was hesitant to play the first Silent Hill, and why I thought there was a good chance I wouldn't get very far. Years ago I had tried to play the original Resident Evil 2, which also has tank controls, and I hated it. I just couldn't get used to it, and even when I kind of did, it just felt so awkward and I struggled so much with it. I haven't gone back to RE2 since then, so I'm not sure if it was just my age at the time, or if RE2 controls worse than Silent Hill, or what, but surprisingly I didn't mind the tank controls as much this time around. I still didn't enjoy them. I definitely prefer what I would consider the normal way of controlling a character, but it didn't kill the experience for me. Although, I will say, it is the reason why, even though I love Silent Hill, it's not the easiest game to revisit. Going back to the beginning of our journey into Silent Hill, you proceed down an alleyway where our protagonist Harry thinks he saw Cheryl go in an attempt to follow her. This is the first time in the game that we get a taste of the amazing industrial music and sound design that Akira Yamaoka has put together. As you go further down the alleyway, the music gets louder and a lot more intimidating. It just screams danger. Honestly, without Akira Yamaoka's work on this game, I don't think it would be nearly as scary as it is. Atmosphere in video games, especially in horror, is incredibly important to create that tension and terrify the player, and that's a huge reason that I've found myself drawn to the genre in recent years. The atmosphere of Silent Hill is achieved near perfectly due to its music and sounds to a point where what you're hearing is a lot more anxiety-inducing than whatever you're seeing. Speaking of seeing, once you reach the end of this little bloody pathway, you find what appears to be a human-like figure just chilling on a wall, or something. And we are presented with Harry's absolutely astonished voice.
What What is this? What's going on here?
Okay, so I know a lot of people have a bone to pick with Silent Hill voice acting, but I will be a defender. Although I can't defend every line delivery as being good for the tone they're trying to set, like this line by Harry, in general, I think it gets way too much hate. But the voice acting did have me laughing out loud a few times during my playthrough. Honestly though, that's just part of the charm for me. So, after that, these weird-looking guys with knives start coming at you, and at this point in the game, you are completely defenseless. I remember thinking to myself, I really hope I'm supposed to die here because I'm about to. And luckily, yes, you are supposed to fail at this. Immediately after our strange encounter, Harry wakes up in a cafe after he's been saved by police officer Cybil Bennett. The music that plays here perfectly encapsulates the feeling of not knowing what the hell is going on, and if what you're experiencing is real or not. I think the most shocking revelation to me in this scene was the knowledge that Silent Hill is a tourist spot. Like, hey babe, there's this beautiful place I think we should go for our honeymoon. Oh yeah? Where? Silent Hill. Just never struck me as a tourist spot. After a short conversation with Cybil, she lends us a gun to protect ourselves with, so we can go find Cheryl. Once Cybil leaves, we can collect some items at the cafe, including a flashlight, medicine, a knife, and a map of the town, all of which will come in handy. Well, except maybe the knife. As we leave the building, the radio starts making this weird noise. Harry goes over to investigate, and this big-ass flying monster crashes into the window and starts attacking us. With the gun Cybil gave us, it's pretty easy to take it down. Once the monster is dead, however, the noise coming from the radio stops. It's here where we learn that the sound of the radio acts as a signal to tell us that enemies are nearby. This is probably one of my favorite aspects of Silent Hill and its approach to horror. Generally, it's much easier in horror to scare people by using jump scares and catching people off guard. The brilliance of Silent Hill utilizing the radio mechanic, however, is that you almost always know that there's an enemy nearby before you see it. This takes away the possibility of being startled by an unexpected enemy. However, it instead builds up this feeling of dread and keeps you on the edge of your seat. You know that an enemy is there, even if you can't see it through the fog. It somehow managed to ease my anxiety as someone that hates jump scares, while also providing me with a different sense of dread. Exiting the building, we have gained free reign to explore Silent Hill. The map is quickly going to become your best friend. I was honestly surprised by how well the map worked in this game. Not that it's difficult to create a map in a video game, but that the map updates as you discover new things. If you're walking down a road that leads to some sort of dead end, Harry will mark it on the map. If you receive instructions to go to a specific place, Harry will mark it on the map. It makes exploring so much easier when it comes to planning a route to get to a certain destination. It doesn't force the player to try and remember what roads are inaccessible, and works so that as long as the player checks their map every now and then, they probably won't get lost or wander in circles. Knowing that this game released in 1999, frankly I didn't expect the navigation to be this straightforward and easy for the player. That isn't to say it doesn't still get confusing sometimes, it does, but it just feels like good game design and something that makes sense for Harry to do as someone who's unfamiliar with the town. As you explore the town, or any other area in the game, you're likely to come across bullets and medicine. In a survival horror game, these items are incredibly important if you want to have any hope of, well, surviving. Naturally, I collected these whenever I came across them, fearing that I would at some point run out of items and be unable to progress any further. However, Silent Hill is incredibly generous when it comes to these items, and by the time I finished the game, I had an abundance of bullets and healing items. I thought this might have been because I played on easy mode, but from what I've seen online, this is true of every difficulty. I shan't complain, but I can see how this could make the game less tense and challenging for some players. Wandering around Silent Hill, you will come across a few different types of enemies. The most common type at this point in the game are those flying things from earlier, and monsters that look like dogs. It's generally not recommended to waste your ammo on most of these enemies, since they're easily avoidable if you just run away from them. But as someone that has never played a Silent Hill game before, or much of the survival horror genre at all, I didn't clue into this until later on in my playthrough. Luckily though, because of the abundance of ammo the game provides you with, I didn't run into any trouble. Making our way back to the creepy alleyway where we almost died last time, we find Cheryl's sketchbook open on a piece of paper that just says, "To school." Guess that means we have our next destination. The road to the school isn't as straightforward as one would think. You'll stumble across broken roads, enemies, and a series of Wizard of Oz keys. However, because I have nothing interesting to say about collecting keys in Silent Hill, let's just skip to the part where we have collected all of them and emerged through to the other side of town. It now appears to be nighttime as we've replaced the fog with the dark. Naturally, this freaked me out a bit. It's little changes like this that keep you on edge in Silent Hill. Luckily, because of our flashlight, we're not completely shrouded in darkness. The light that the flashlight provides looks really good. I'm not sure what the more technical way of describing that would be, but it looks good. I suppose now is a good time to discuss the in-game graphics of Silent Hill. While some people may disagree, I feel like the graphics still hold up pretty well for a PS1 game. Granted, I did play this on my Steam Deck and not on a PlayStation 1, but still, I thought it looked pretty damn good for 1999. Anyways, back to the story. Eventually, we reach Midwich Elementary School. Now, I know this isn't an RPG, so I'm not sure if dungeon is the right way to describe it, but we've essentially reached our first dungeon of the game. Seriously, if anyone knows a better survival horror-esque term to use for this, please let me know. Anyway, in these Silent Hill dungeons, our job is to basically explore every room possible, collect items, and solve puzzles while not being killed by the enemies that occupy the area. Frankly, I am not the brightest when it comes to puzzles, especially the ones in this game, so I did in fact use my best friend Google to solve a majority of the puzzles in this game. I mean, I gave them a try, but anyway, not all of us can be big-brained. Although it's easy to avoid enemies while exploring Silent Hill, it's a bit more difficult once you get to these enclosed spaces like the school hallways or classrooms. It's also worth noting that once you kill the enemies in a particular room, they usually don't respawn, so for me it was a good way of keeping track of what places I had or hadn't been yet by clearing out the enemies in a space. The enemies in the school look like the same ones that attacked us at the beginning of the game with their knives. There's also this other weird enemy you can come across that's even smaller in appearance and is almost transparent. I remember being freaked out by it because I didn't know what the hell was going on. If it was a good entity or if it would one-hit kill me. You can't attack them in the same way you would the usual enemies, so it left me wondering what exactly it was doing here. Anyway, I suppose I haven't really talked about the combat in this game yet, and to be frank, that's because there's not much to talk about. You'll gain a few melee weapons and guns throughout the game, and you'll use them to take out any enemies. For my playthrough, I almost exclusively used guns because I wasn't a fan of a lot of the melee weapons, and running out of ammo was never a concern for me. The aim on the guns works well enough to get the job done, but if you're looking for a game with great combat, Silent Hill won't be for you. It's not bad, but it doesn't do anything special. The combat is passable, and it isn't the main focus of the game. You can also finish enemies off by stomping on them, which I liked. One of the closest things to a jump scare in this game happens in the school with the appearance of a cat. I love the buildup of tension here and then this harmless cat jumping out. Really makes you wonder what that cat's doing here in Silent Hill. But then when the cat leaves the room, we get an implication that it is no longer with us. It's like building tension, releasing tension, and then building it up again. False sense of safety when you see the cat, and then brought back to reality once you hear it being killed. So, we finish exploring the school, and now we can enter the clock tower in the courtyard. Once we emerge on the other side, it seems like we're just back in the courtyard, where we were before. Except, something is a little different. There's what looks to be this weird sigil in the center that wasn't there before. When we re-enter the school, what used to be a normal-looking school now has what looks like metal grating for floors and dirty, rusty walls. This is our first look at the otherworld in Silent Hill. Going into Silent Hill, I didn't have any knowledge of the otherworld. At first, I thought this was like a secret part of the school that actually does exist. But now, I realize that it's actually the otherworld version of the school. Also, can I just say that I hated any time I had to go to the courtyard, because the music that plays here is so scary. It's that loud industrial music, and it just made me feel like anything could pop out at any moment, and it just feels like it's screaming to get out of there. Great work, Yamaoka. As I mentioned earlier, atmosphere in horror games is such a key aspect when it comes to immersing the player and making them feel tense or frightened. Once we enter the otherworld in Silent Hill, that atmosphere becomes even more heightened and memorable. Even though we've already explored the school, the different appearance that the same areas take on now serves as a great contrast. It makes you wonder just what secrets this school is hiding and makes you question what the hell is going on. Where did all of these new bodies and blood come from? Why are they here? Those are the things that I was wondering as I explored this new version of the school. We enter a room that was previously locked, and it's filled with telephones on a table. Naturally, you know there's something important here since the door was locked before. But you investigate the phones, and nothing else in the room has anything to offer. However, when you make your way to leave the room, a telephone rings. When you answer, you hear Cheryl on the other line. The call is short-lived and we don't get to have any sort of conversation. Where was Cheryl calling from? Was it even really Cheryl? A lot of the events in Silent Hill will leave you asking questions and often getting no answers or just vague implications. It's the psychological horror element of the game working its magic, and not all questions need answers. We come across the locker room, where we found the cat previously, and like before, we hear a noise coming from the locker. I remember I expected to see the corpse of the cat inside, since it, sadly passed after our encounter with it earlier. Instead, though, we open the locker, and even though it appears covered in blood, there's nothing inside. The tension has been released, and it left me feeling a bit safer. However, once we move away from the locker, we get startled again by a body falling out of a different locker. Man, this locker room is just not giving us a break. Eventually, we come across a kid's book detailing a hunter and his encounter with a reptile creature. The way that the book describes this made it pretty obvious to me that this would be a strategy for a future boss fight, which I thought was cool. It had me anticipating my battle with a big-ass lizard, and I think that's more interesting than just randomly throwing it at me. Also, let's face it, Harry probably would have died if he hadn't read that strategy beforehand. He is an everyman. Once you reach the boss fight, though, it's a little bit of a letdown. Since Silent Hill combat in general is just okay, it follows that this boss is simply okay at best. I did like the enemy design and it was kinda cool, but all you need to do is dodge its attack where it eats you and shoot it in the mouth. It's okay. After this, we get a glimpse of the girl we almost ran over on our way into Silent Hill, and she just kind of fades away. Is she real? Who knows? Once we exit the boiler room, we're back in the regular Silent Hill, and we hear a loud church bell ringing. This gives us our next destination as we head to the church to see what's up. As we arrive at the church, we meet Dahlia Gillespie. The music that plays here is, once again, incredible. We quickly see that Dahlia is an interesting character as she explains she's been waiting for us. Naturally, this got me wondering just how much she knows about the town, about Harry, and about Cheryl. Who exactly is this woman and what is she doing in Silent Hill? Once again, say what you will about Silent Hill's voice acting, but the unsettling energy of it all works so well here. It's hard to pin down Dahlia as a character, because she clearly knows things, but she's also clearly unhinged too. Is she trying to help us or harm us? It's too early to know for sure. Harry is clearly confused by her to say the least, but he decides to trust her as he really doesn't have many other options if he wants to find Cheryl. Dahlia graciously gifts us with the Floros and tells us to head to the hospital. To get there, we have to cross the bridge and reach the other side of Silent Hill. Silent Hill is bigger than I thought. Reaching the other side of town, I enter the police station. This isn't required to progress, but you can pick up some goods and learn a bit more about the town. Here, I learned about the plant White Claudia that seems to be used for some kind of drug in the town. This will be important later. Back on track though, we arrive at the hospital. Here, we meet another man with a gun that isn't afraid to use it. He seems normal other than the fact that he almost shot us. He works at the hospital and is just as confused as everyone else. Of course, we ask him if he's seen Cheryl and he politely insinuates that Cheryl is probably dead by now. He seems really kind. Oh yeah, and his name's Coffin. After that brief interaction, he leaves us to explore the hospital by ourselves. The layout is similar to the school with various hallways, rooms, and locked doors. Using the elevator, we also gain access to different floors of the hospital. One of my favorite parts in this game is when you first go into the elevator, you'll see there are 3 floors including a basement. However, once you reach the 3rd floor and go into the elevator again, a new button appears that'll take us to the mysterious 4th floor. It's such a small part of the game, but I thought this transition to the other world was so well done. It's the subtlety that works so well in psychological horror to unsettle the player. Although, to be fair, I mostly just thought it was really cool and it made me excited for what's to come. We reach the 4th floor and see this weird vision of the girl from before entering a building somewhere. It seems like it's something that the town is perhaps showing Harry. The Otherworld Hospital is similar to the school when it comes to the aesthetic, both visually and musically. The enemies in this area take the form of nurses and the occasional doctor. Pretty fitting for a hospital. At least to me, these enemies are more intimidating than the smaller enemies that occupied the school. The nurses make these weird, almost moaning sounds, and it's definitely not in a sexy way. It's pretty unsettling and definitely added to the horror. Moving on, we reach what looks to be a patient's room in the Otherworld Hospital, and on the bedside table there's a picture of the girl we've been seeing since we've entered Silent Hill. Her name is Alessa. However, it remains unclear how she plays into everything. Taking the key we found in that room, we enter the examination room. Here, we meet my favorite character in Silent Hill, Lisa Garland. She's a nurse at the hospital and is the only person we've met in the other world of Silent Hill so far. She's frightened by everything that's been going on with the monsters and environments of Silent Hill, and seeks comfort from Harry. Lisa is very pretty, and not gonna lie, if we ever get a Silent Hill remake, I will be very much looking forward to seeing my girl in modern day graphics. Now, this might shock you, but Lisa has also not seen Cheryl. Interestingly, Lisa explains how the hospital staff are under strict orders to never enter the basement. Definitely seems kinda suspicious and like they're hiding something down there. It seems that the town of Silent Hill isn't just paranormal in nature, but that the people living in the town are also perhaps playing a part in the horror of Silent Hill. As Harry and Lisa are talking, Harry seems to get a piercing headache, and the sirens start to go off again. He collapses, and when we wake up, we're back in the normal Silent Hill. And instead of the wonderful Lisa being at our side, Dahlia is back. Okay, side note here, Dahlia still has no shoes on and is walking around barefoot. I understand that perhaps she is just in touch with nature, but Jesus Christ, on a hospital floor, she's gonna catch some sort of ungodly disease strolling around like that. We ask her what's going on, and she just says,
"Darkness."
So perhaps she's already caught something from these floors that's getting to her head. Harry is confused as fuck, because who wouldn't be when talking to Dahlia Gillespie? Harry is truly me in this situation. I love him so much. Dahlia tells us to go to another church and informs us that whatever happens from here on out is all up to us and it's out of her hands. No pressure or anything. She mentions the sigils that we've been seeing up until now, like the one in the school courtyard, and it turns out that they weren't just there for the aesthetic, but that, according to Dahlia, it's the mark of Samael, and she tells us to not let it be completed, but never explains why. Then she abruptly leaves like everyone else that we've run into. The people in this town really are fucked. Moving on, we go to the antique shop using the key that Dahlia left behind for us. The antique shop looks really ratty and abandoned. We move a cabinet and find a hole in the wall. As we admire the hole in the wall, Cybil has returned to tell us that she found Cheryl and a way out of the town, so we can go home now. Just joking. She essentially tells us that we're fucked, saying,
"It's nuts."
Cybil does say that she saw a girl, but she's unsure if she saw Cheryl or perhaps Alessa. Harry reacts well to this.
And you just let her go? Where was it?
Harry tells Cybil about Dahlia and how she said the town was being devoured by darkness. Cybil bluntly states,
"Must be on drugs."
Can you tell that this is one of my favorite conversations in the entire game? Cybil actually goes more into detail about how there's a drug problem in the town and the police can't get to the bottom of it. Going off the information we found earlier in the police department, it's probably White Claudia that she's referring to. Is this entire game just Harry taking one bad trip? Harry also seems to be starting to wonder this and asks Cybil if she's ever experienced the other world. She doesn't have any clue what he's talking about, so that's comforting. Maybe we're the problem. I like seeing Harry speak with Cybil about this because it makes it even more unclear if what we're experiencing could be some sort of drug-induced hallucination and makes us question the reality of what we're experiencing. It makes it clear that not everyone experiences the other world the same way that Harry does, but we do know that Lisa can also access it. Does the town pick and choose who can see the other world? Is Lisa just a part of the hallucination? As of now, the answers to those questions are left to the player's imagination. Personally, I felt like everything being drug-related was never the case, but I did end up being surprised by how much the drug trafficking did play a role in the plot of Silent Hill, even if it was beneath the surface. After talking to Cybil, we enter the hole in the wall and are met with some sort of altar in a tiny space about the size of a closet. Apparently this is the other church that Dahlia was talking about. When we go to exit, the candles on the altar light on fire. The scene cuts back to Cybil calling out to Harry. She enters the hole in the wall, and Harry is nowhere to be seen. Somehow, we're back at the hospital with Lisa. Things just seem to be getting stranger and stranger. If it was uncertain before if what was happening is real or not, it definitely is now. The way that Harry's voice has a sort of echo to it as he speaks makes this whole thing even more otherworldly, and adds to the dreamlike atmosphere of it all.
Lisa, do you know a woman named Dahlia Gillespie?
It's a small touch that goes a long way. Harry asks Lisa about Dahlia, and unlike Cybil, she seems to know her. Dahlia had a child that died in a fire, but we're not sure of when that happened. Lisa tells us that the townspeople followed an occult religion in the past that dabbled with black magic. She mentions how once the town changed into a tourist spot because of the resort, People weren't too happy, and a few of the people involved with the changes ended up dying in weird accidents, and that people said it was a curse. Again, it seems like the supernatural and the townspeople are working together to create the mess that is Silent Hill. After this scene, Harry wakes up on a floor. Was the conversation we just had with Lisa real or not? Harry asks himself the same thing, wondering if everything is just a dream and none of this is real. It looks like we have once again entered the otherworld. Leaving the antique shop, we emerge to the otherworld version of the town. Before this, the only times we've been in the otherworld have been the enclosed spaces of the school and hospital. However, now it seems like this power that consumes Silent Hill has been able to manifest in the entire town. The pavement is replaced with the metal grating, it's raining outside, and instead of fog, we're surrounded by darkness. It was at this point in the game where I really started to feel like shit was getting real. The already oppressive atmosphere of Silent Hill just got even more intense. We find a mall we can enter, and there looks to be 2 screens in the area, but neither of them work when we investigate them. When we go to leave, however, static fills the screens, followed by the mark of Samael. Then, our daughter, Cheryl.
Daddy, help me. Please, where are you?
Cheryl!
We get a close-up of this video of Cheryl, who appears to be struggling. She says the exact same words she said over the phone to us earlier. It's incredibly haunting, and once again reminds us that we need to find Cheryl before it's too late. With all that being said, though, because of the nature of Silent Hill, I still found myself questioning just what was going on here, and was Cheryl already dead? As I mentioned earlier, she says the exact same line she did earlier in the game. The delivery and everything is identical. It made me wonder if, wherever Cheryl was, someone had kidnapped her and recorded her like this just to lure Harry to them. Maybe she was already gone if they couldn't even use some new material. Even after the cutscene ends, the screens continue to show vaguely unsettling imagery with their black and white static. I think this was one of the parts of the game that freaked me out the most. Moving forward, we explore the upper area of the mall, and as we do, the metal grating beneath us gives out, and Harry takes a fall. He makes quite the bang, and here we have our next boss encounter. This enemy is like a worm? A caterpillar? This fight is even more straightforward than the lizard from earlier, and is the most lackluster in the game. It's honestly the kind of boss fight that feels like it's there just because someone on the team said there should be more boss fights, because that's what gamers want. The worm does open up a new pathway for us though, so maybe that's its sole purpose. Following our new path, the music becomes more intense. I am once again feeling as though shit is about to hit the fan. Entering the hospital again, we are reunited with our favorite nurse, Lisa Garland. She's relieved to see us and gives us some directions on how to get to our next destination to reunite with Cybil. Although we have to keep looking for Cheryl, Lisa really wants us to stay with her. She's terrified being alone in Silent Hill. And well, who can blame her? Our wonderful Harry tells her that she should come with him. After all, at least that way he can protect her. However, Lisa says that for some reason she feels like she's not supposed to leave this place. Interesting. As awful as it is, we leave Lisa and continue our way down to the sewers so we can reach the lake. Before that, though, we need to fight another boss. It's a moth? Similarly to the last boss fight, I don't have much to say here. This one is a bit more interesting, both design-wise and strategy-wise, but it's still just okay. When we defeat it, though, we're finally out of the otherworld and back in the regular, foggy, and snowy Silent Hill. It's almost refreshing after being in the otherworld for so long. We make our way to the sewers, and if you've played Silent Hill, you will probably be unsurprised to learn that this was my least favorite area in the game. It just didn't have the same intrigue as the school, hospital, or even the town. I think part of what makes those other locations scary is that even in a normal setting, there isn't really anything to be scared of. We're familiar with those areas in our everyday lives, so when they're suddenly filled with monsters and weird shit, it feels more jarring and leaves you with this unsettling feeling. However, I don't know about you, but I don't spend much time in sewers, and if I did, I would probably just be grossed out by them. I see why an area like that would work in a horror game, it just didn't affect me as much as the other areas. The enemies here aren't really interesting either. The sewers just didn't do much for me, and honestly, I think the game would probably be better if this section was just cut, and we'd go straight to the lake since nothing major happens here. Luckily, we emerge from the sewers and can progress further. Here, there's an entirely optional part of the game where we can see Kaufman again, learn he's involved with drug trafficking and is indeed very suspicious, which I entirely skipped on my first playthrough. Going into this game, I knew basically nothing, including the fact that there are multiple endings and certain requirements you have to meet to obtain the good and good plus endings. Needless to say, running into Kaufman here and grabbing some of his items here are a part of what you need to do to get the best endings. It is unfortunate that for my first playthrough, I got the worst possible ending, but I guess it wasn't entirely unexpected. We'll get back to that more later though. Just keep in mind that I am a loser and missed out on this content during my first playthrough. Now, back to what I actually did do in the game. As we continue to roam Silent Hill, the town starts to shift back to the other world. This time, however, the shift happens right before our eyes. Every time prior to this, Harry either gets knocked out and wakes up in the other world, or enters the other world as he enters a new room. It feels really trippy, and whether it was their intention or not, this cutscene starts with voice acting as Harry questions what's going on, but when he talks about it being like a nightmare, there's no voice dialogue. There are a few other cutscenes that shift from voice acting to no voice acting within the same scene, but I think the uneasiness of it all works best here. Although, at first I was just thinking that maybe the VA budget had reached its limit, I do feel like perhaps it was intentional to keep messing with the player's expectations. After some more running through Silent Hill, we're reunited with Cybil. They have the usual conversation about how fucked Silent Hill is, only this time it seems like Harry has gained a better understanding of what's going on with the other world, the darkness consuming the town, and where Cheryl is. Cybil thinks Harry has finally lost his mind, and then we get a Dahlia jump scare. Honestly, it felt kind of jarring having 3 characters interacting together since prior to this, Harry's only ever talked with one person at a time. It's also funny seeing Cybil and Dahlia specifically interact. If Cybil thinks Harry's starting to lose it, I would love to hear her inner dialogue about Dahlia. Dahlia gives a monologue about the demons, the Mark of Samael being completed, etc. And when she's finished, Harry's getting sick of the theatrics and asks her just what the fuck he's supposed to do about it to get Cheryl back. Dahlia tells us that we need to stop the so-called demon by going to the lake in the amusement park. Cybil tells us she'll cover the amusement park while we go check out the lighthouse. After Cybil leaves, Dahlia instructs us to use the Floros. However, Cybil doesn't have a Floros, so Harry asks Dahlia about her. In response, Dahlia simply leaves. Thanks, Dahlia. We make our way to the lighthouse and climb a long spiral staircase, which is not fun to navigate with tank controls. When we reach the top, we see Alessa, the child that Dahlia says is actually a demon. She has completed another sigil, and before we can talk to her or use the Floros, she fades away. When we exit the lighthouse, the game very kindly takes us back to where we met up with Cybil before, instead of making us travel there on foot. That was very nice. Anyway, we get back and Cybil hasn't returned, so maybe she ran into trouble at the amusement park. Searching for Cybil, we arrive at the amusement park's merry-go-round. How joyous. We find Cybil and she's sitting in a wheelchair and looks out of it. As she stands up, we see something is clearly wrong as she stumbles and her eyes appear red. It looks like she's possessed by something. As she gets closer to us, she pulls out her gun, and depending on what you've done in the game up until this point, you may or may not have a boss fight on your hands. For silly old me, this was a boss fight where I had to take down Cybil. I feel like this is the strongest boss battle in the game when it comes to the plot, the aesthetic, and even the gameplay mechanics. It's kind of a shame that the best boss fight is pretty much optional if you're able to save her. Cybil can both hit us with her gun and shoot at us, naturally. I think what makes this fight stand out in comparison to the others is that instead of some random monster, this is Cybil. Someone that's been helping us out since the beginning, but has now lost control. I know at least for me, I felt guilty at the thought of killing Cybil. So, I ran to Google, searching, "Can Cybil live?" And this was when I found out that I had fucked up earlier in the game and now had no choice but to kill Cybil. So that sucked. Even though I didn't want to kill her, I had to, or else I couldn't continue the game. At least not without starting over. This fight is also the most charming. The only other boss arena that rivals it is fighting the moth on the roof, but even with that, I think the merry-go-round still takes the cake. My favorite part of this is how if you run from Cybil, there's a chance she'll just sit on a horse and wait. It's both funny and also haunting. I thought it was a great touch to the boss fight having Cybil interact with the childish environment while also trying to kill you. So, unfortunately, Cybil had to die in my playthrough. Rest in peace, Queen. Because of this, though, I also missed out an important story beat where Harry reveals to Cybil that Cheryl is actually adopted and that perhaps there's some sort of connection between Cheryl and Silent Hill. To be fair, I did already suspect that Cheryl was adopted, so this wasn't a huge thing to miss out on, but I mean, It would have been nice if I was able to learn those things during my playthrough. With Cybil dead, Alessa makes an appearance again. This time, though, we're able to use the Floros to stop her from marking the last sigil. It's here where we learn that Alessa is actually Dahlia's daughter, and they seem to have a strange relationship. It looks like Dahlia uses magic to transport her and Alessa somewhere. I feel just as confused as Harry at this point. To add to the confusion, once that scene ends, Harry wakes up and he's back with Lisa. Lisa tells us that while we were gone, she decided to have a look in the basement, and it felt familiar to her somehow, but she couldn't quite remember. Harry tries to comfort her, but this just leads to her storming out of the room. If you go to save in this room, you'll see that the area is named Nowhere. So, even though we've just seen Lisa, it's unclear if we're actually in the hospital where we usually see her. We are in the other world, though. Exiting the room, we only have one door to approach. The elevator opens up to us, and Harry believes he's being summoned. We have reached the endgame of Silent Hill. Once we exit the elevator, it appears that we're in another dungeon-like area that most closely resembles the hospital in the other world. However, entering some doors takes us to the classrooms that we previously saw in the elementary school. We're in some sort of amalgamation of the places we've been to already that are important to Silent Hill and whatever spell the town is under. There are a variety of keys to obtain and puzzles to solve, as one would expect. Possibly the most confusing yet simple one being the astrological symbols and counting how many limbs each of them has. We run into Lisa once again after we obtain an amulet of Solomon. She confesses to Harry that she's discovered why she's alive even though all the other nurses around here are dead. She says that she's the same as them and begs Harry to stay by her as she's terrified. However, Harry is also rightfully terrified of Lisa now and is too frightened to be beside her. And we're presented with what I would consider the best moment of Silent Hill. The blood begins to run down Lisa, slowly covering her. She stumbles and tries to reach Harry for comfort, even though it's too late. Seeing this scene for the first time truly blew me away. It's a feeling that few games come to accomplish. Even though this game released in 1999, and even when I was a child, I was playing games that graphically were more impressive than Silent Hill, I still found myself in awe of what Takayoshi Sato had been able to create all those years ago. Even with the graphical limitations, I feel like Lisa's expressions are able to perfectly show the loneliness she's feeling, how scared she is, and how she can no longer hide from herself. I remember being surprised when the blood started running down her face, and I feel like the entire scene left me speechless in the best way possible. The score from Akira Yamaoka in this scene is beyond words. Not Tomorrow is a song that resonated with me from the moment I heard it. Since writing this video, I've played both Silent Hill and Silent Hill 2, two games with astounding soundtracks. And so far, this song is easily my favorite and will likely remain that way even after I play the other games in the series. It just creates such a unique feeling that not much music accomplishes. It manages to feel both depressing and hopeful. Pairing this perfect music with the incredible CGI cutscene, this moment is what truly solidified me as a Silent Hill fan. I feel like I could make an entire video dedicated to this scene alone. It's just so powerful, and frankly, I didn't expect Silent Hill to make me feel this way. Although, perhaps the rest of Silent Hill is still up for debate, in my eyes, this cutscene with Lisa has aged incredibly well and still holds up today in 2023. Regaining control of Harry, Not Tomorrow continues to play, and I remember just sitting there listening to it for a while in awe of what had just happened. I had to take a breather after that scene. Not because it was scary, but just because I had to take in how it made me feel and sit with it. If you choose to re-enter the room Lisa was in, you'll find that she's no longer there. She has, however, left behind a diary. Reading her diary makes things even more depressing as we learn more about her past. She writes about caring for a patient that was essentially beyond healing but remains alive. She plans on quitting her job at the hospital because she can't take it anymore. She also writes about needing drugs and likely going through withdrawals. Probably an addiction she's taken on to try and cope with the horrors she's dealing with as a nurse. Her entire story is heartbreaking, and it's the kind of thing that just leaves you feeling empty inside. As much as I'd love to talk about Lisa Garland all day, though, we still have more game to cover. Exiting the room again, the bittersweet music stops playing and we're thrown back into the thick of it in Silent Hill. The atmosphere and environments throughout Nowhere continue to act as a showcase representing the other world of Silent Hill. Eventually, we reach a room with the television where we can play a tape that we picked up earlier. We see Lisa sitting hunched over at a table. She looks exhausted. She describes in more detail the patient she mentioned in her diary that's alive but beyond healing. It's interesting how a lot of what we find out about Lisa happens after she disappears. She never directly tells us, perhaps because she's repressing those memories or her mind has been affected by the drugs. I feel like the fact that she doesn't tell us these things directly, though, goes to show how traumatized she is by her experience working as a nurse watching over this patient. It's also worth noting that finding out about Lisa's past is entirely optional. You don't need to read her diary or watch the tape to progress through the game. Although most players will likely uncover her past, the game makes you seek the answers. Personally, I really like this approach. You don't have to jump through tons of hoops to learn more about her, but you will be rewarded with a much better understanding of her character if you do put in a tiny bit of effort. I know I'm focusing a lot on Lisa as a character here, because I feel like her story is one of the most intriguing and perhaps understated in the game. Although I also enjoy the larger plot of Silent Hill revolving around the cult and Alessa, I find Lisa's story about being taken advantage of at her job, taking care of this helpless child, being blackmailed by the cult, and going through a drug addiction to be a much more human story that I think just naturally resonates a lot more with people. Lisa is very much a victim in the story of Silent Hill, and in my eyes, she has the most compelling story of all the characters in this game. Continuing throughout Nowhere and reaching the endgame of Silent Hill, the game begins throwing more lore and story at us than it has for almost the entire game so far. We see what appears to be a flashback with Dahlia, Kaufman, and two other doctors surrounding a hospital bed and discussing their plan. Side note here, I didn't realize during my playthrough that one of the men here was Kaufman. Anyway, we can see Alessa's picture on a side table, so it's confirmed that Alessa is the troubled patient that Lisa had to take care of that was being exploited by the cult, including her own mother. They talk about drawing some sort of power out of her, and honestly, most of the conversation is very vague and unhinged.
We'll use a magical spell.
This was the part of the game where I started feeling pretty confused over what the hell was going on with the cult and what they were trying to achieve. However, I will say that I don't know if I'd necessarily knock the game for this. After all, we're playing as Harry and seeing things through his perspective. It makes sense that we don't know all the ins and outs about the cult and what exactly they're talking about. It's supposed to sound unhinged and confusing, and Harry's probably thinking the same thing that we are as we watch this conversation. With that being said, though, I do think they could have perhaps sprinkled in a couple more papers or items to discover that tell us more about the cult, similar to how we learned Lisa's story or about White Claudia through exploring and discovering lore, so that it's just a tad easier to grasp if you've been paying attention. Unlocking the final door, we see another cutscene, this time with Dahlia and Alessa. Dahlia is tugging at Alessa and they're arguing about something. It sounds like Alessa has some sort of power that the cult wants to take advantage of. Poor Alessa just wants to be happy with her mother, but Dahlia is crazy and all she can focus on is this cult shit. Really sad when you think about it. Moving on, we have reached our final confrontation. From here on out, what you see is determined by what ending you'll get. As discussed earlier, I got the worst possible ending. So, let's talk about that. For starters, Cybil is dead, so she's not here. As Harry, we confront Dahlia and what looks to be Alessa and a bandaged person in a wheelchair. Dahlia tells us that Cheryl has been restored to her former self and gestures to the person in the wheelchair next to Alessa. She describes the hell that Alessa has been through for the past 7 years and starts talking about a he who is waiting to be born. Are you confused too? Great. So, Dahlia says,
My daughter will be the mother of God.
I don't know, Dahlia, that sounds kind of far-fetched to me. But then Alessa and allegedly Cheryl start glowing, and then a grown woman in a white gown appears. There's some lightning emanating from Alessa Cheryl, and Dahlia gets lit on fire. If anything else, playing the bad ending gets you some of the funniest cutscenes. Anyway, just shoot a woman that's possibly your child for a while as the final boss. The boss is about what you'd expect from a Silent Hill boss. Not much else to say. After shooting your daughter to death, we get what is, in my opinion, the funniest dialogue in the entire game.
Thank you, Daddy. Goodbye.
It is quite possibly the most anticlimactic ending to a video game I've ever seen, and even for a bad ending, I found myself in disbelief over how funny the entire thing was. Fire starts raining down and Harry falls to his knees. Credits roll, and for our post-credits scene, we see Harry dead in his car. Now, I can't imagine playing this game in 1999 with no knowledge of the multiple endings and seeing this. I think I would have thrown my PlayStation. It's even funnier because the entire game up until that last 10 minutes is great, and then it just ends in the funniest way possible with absolutely no payoff and a he was dead the entire time ending. However, thank God this isn't the only ending, because I think if it was, there would not have been a Silent Hill 2. I didn't bother replaying the game to see more of the endings. Instead, I just watched what I'd missed on YouTube. So, I'll briefly cover the Good Plus ending since that's considered the best ending. In the Good Plus ending, Cybil is present when we meet up with Dahlia, Cheryl, and Alessa at the end. To save Cybil earlier at the amusement park, we need to pick up a plastic bottle at the hospital, which I did, and fill it with an unknown liquid, which I did not. Funnily enough, I remember leaving the hospital having never used the plastic bottle, and I remember thinking to myself, that's weird. Anyway, with the liquid in the bottle, you can throw it at Cybil during her boss battle, and a freaky, parasitic creature leaves her body. Sorry I couldn't save you, Cybil. As mentioned before, the other requirement for achieving one of the good endings in Silent Hill is completing the side quest with Kaufman, where we learn about his role with the drug trafficking in town. Moving on with the Good Plus ending, we learned that when Harry used the Floros, he was actually helping out Dahlia by stopping Alessa, who was actually trying to help us. Cybil shoots Dahlia, but I guess Dahlia is immune to bullets, unlike fire. After Cybil gets pushed back by Dahlia, the cutscene continues similarly to the bad ending, until...
My daughter will be the mother of God.
This time around, Kaufman comes in and shoots Dahlia. I guess she's not immune to all bullets. He's pissed at Dahlia, I mean, he did just shoot her, and it looks like he's trying to stop her plan. He pulls out some... whatever the fuck that is. And Dahlia is very distraught. He biffs it at Cheryl Alessa, and...
Huh? What the?
This is great. Everything's fine. Dahlia gets lit on fire again. It's still funny, but the bad ending is still on top for Dahlia death scene. Now, it's our turn to defeat the demon. Because I just watched this ending, I don't have fuck all to say about this, but I'm gonna wager that it's pretty similar to every other Silent Hill boss so far, and that it's okay. Let me know what you thought of this boss. Anyway, after defeating the demon thing, Cheryl Alessa gives us a... baby? Wow. Harry became a grandfather under short notice. Cheryl Alessa points to a light as she begins to fade away, and we need to escape from the raining fire. Cybil comes back to her senses and joins us. Then, there's this wonderful cutscene of Lisa dragging Kaufman down to hell with her. I don't think I've really mentioned this yet, but going through the Good Plus ending route, unlike me, it's more clearly implied through the side quest with Kaufman in combination with Lisa's diary and tape that Kaufman was the one selling her drugs and blackmailing her. So, this is just his karma. Harry, Cybil, and unnamed baby are all able to escape, and we are blessed with another of Akira Yamaoka's best songs. We see the three of them running in the fog of Silent Hill. Having escaped the other world, and fingers crossed, they're able to escape Silent Hill as well. After the credits, we see a scene mirroring the opening of the game where Harry and his wife are holding Cheryl, only this time it's Harry, Cybil, and unnamed baby. Seems like everyone's happy ever after. Kind of. Definitely more satisfying than the bad ending. With that being said, however, even after watching the cutscenes from the Good Plus ending, I found myself so intrigued by the town, the characters, and how everything weaved together to create this story that it left me wanting more. At its core, Silent Hill's story is about a man searching for his missing daughter in this haunted town. Eventually, uncovering the reason that he and his daughter have been summoned to the town is because of a cult that plans on performing a ritual to birth a god, or, something like that. It just never really got deeper than that. Although you can learn more by reading papers and interacting with other items in the environment, that's mostly just supplemental material. It's not unheard of for video games to put the onus on the player when it comes to piecing together the plot or lore of a game, and that's not necessarily my issue here. My issue is that, even with the puzzle pieces we're given, I wish we had a 1,000-piece puzzle instead of a 750-piece puzzle. I have since gone on to play Silent Hill 2, and I feel like that game does a much better job with its story presentation. Team Silent was creating the outline for this new series from scratch with this first entry, and by Silent Hill 2, they likely had a better idea of what they wanted to convey. Even with this small grievance, I do appreciate how the game doesn't hold your hand when it comes to explaining the plot and trusts the player to piece things together. It also encourages you to do multiple playthroughs, the story naturally making more sense as you replay and pick up on certain things. I don't think everything has to be tied up in a neat bow. Part of the charm in this series is how things can be left ambiguous and up to the player interpretation. If we somehow ever got a remake of Silent Hill that wasn't just Shattered Memories, which I haven't played yet, my biggest request would be to expand on the story, although, to be honest, maybe that isn't the best idea if Team Silent isn't working on it. Anyhow, we have reached the post-credits scene of Silent Hill where we see a silly blooper reel of all the characters as if they were actors behind the scenes. It's fun. Maybe a strange choice for a horror game, but I haven't even touched on the UFO ending, so it's really not the strangest thing about this game. And that is the end of Silent Hill. So, we've made it this far. You've made it this far into this lengthy video. Thank you. However, I'm not done yet. It's time to share some of my final thoughts with you. Silent Hill is a game that I was not sure I would enjoy, much less complete. And well, I guess it's kind of up for debate if I actually completed it since I didn't get the good ending, but I finished one playthrough. And with that one playthrough, I found myself falling in love with the town of Silent Hill. Akira Yamaoka's soundtrack and sound design, the unsettling voice acting, the otherworldly atmosphere, and the incredible CGI cutscenes. There were things I wasn't as fond of, such as the tank controls, bare-bones gameplay, and difficult puzzles, but overall, playing Silent Hill was a positive experience for me, as I was able to overlook some of those aspects of the game I didn't enjoy as much, because the parts that I did enjoy were so strong. If there's one area I would love to see improved in Silent Hill, it is definitely the story presentation. I do feel like even in the good endings, it can still be difficult to piece the plot together in a coherent way. If we were ever to see a Silent Hill remake, I would love to see the cult expanded on a bit more. I just feel like there's so much going on in the actual plot of this game, but sometimes it only feels like we're getting a sneak peek. It can feel kind of daunting, playing a classic, beloved video game like Silent Hill. What if everyone that loves it has just been blinded by nostalgia and the game isn't actually that good, and I have to be the bearer of bad news that this game actually sucks when you try and play it in the modern era because it hasn't aged well? Well, luckily that wasn't the case with Silent Hill. When I first played Silent Hill, I gave it a 7 out of 10. Now, I know with modern day game reviews that might seem low to y'all, but that's actually a pretty good score, especially for a game over 20 years old. However, I don't think the score is actually the most important thing here. The most important thing here is that after I played Silent Hill, I couldn't stop thinking about it. At this point, I feel confident in saying I've watched just about every video on YouTube that there is on Silent Hill, and have since been compelled to create my own video about my experience playing the game. I haven't felt this way about a game in quite some time. Silent Hill, and honestly, Silent Hill as an entire series, has grown very special to me in the short time since I've played it. Even in 2023, I can see why this game was so popular when it came out, how it managed to spawn a series with so many entries and even multiple film adaptations, and why people still talk about it to this day. I am incredibly happy that I played through Silent Hill, even if I'm a bit late to the game. I can't really imagine how these past few months would have been if I hadn't, since it's been all I've been able to think about. If you've made it this far into the video and you still haven't played Silent Hill for whatever reason, it is still worth your time in 2023. And if it doesn't click with you, try Silent Hill 2, although that's another topic for another day. And if you're a fan of Silent Hill, whether you've just played through the game like me, or you've been a fan for 20 years, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I am so grateful that you took the long time to watch me babble on about my experience playing Silent Hill in the year 2023. Thank you so much, and until next time...
Thank you, Daddy. Goodbye.
If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. I hope to create more videos like this, and I'd love it if you stuck around to see more of what's to come from my channel. Thank you so much to my friend Jay, who graciously offered to proofread this huge script and encouraged me when working on this project. All my social media links are in the description below if you'd like to keep up with me elsewhere. And that's all I have to say. Thanks again. See you next time.